What's going on, collectors? Welcome back to the channel. Today's video is going to be something a little bit different. We're going to be talking about fundamental versus technical analysis, which really, if you're investing in any types of markets, whether it's sports cards, stock market, crypto, you should be brushing up a little bit on this stuff, but really this could be applied to any market. So as always, this is not any investment advice. You should just use this to educate yourself a little bit. And we're going to talk about which one matters more, fundamental versus technical, as well as a little checklist for when you're buying sports cards that I think will really help you not jump the gun on making some kind of questionable decisions and hopefully keep you profitable, whether you're simply collecting or trying to flip or investing for the long term. So let's dive straight into it. First off, we're going to define fundamental versus technical analysis. So as you can see, we have Investopedia pulled up here on the screen. I'm just going to quickly run through these. So fundamental and technical analysis are two major schools of thought when it comes to approaching the markets, yet are at opposite ends of the spectrum. Investors and traders use both to research and forecast future stock prices. Like any investment strategy or philosophy, both have advocates and adversaries. So we'll get to this a little bit later, but I think you're going to definitely need a combination of both to make smart investing decisions, whether it's sports cards, crypto, etc. So fundamental analysis evaluates stocks by attempting to measure their intrinsic value. Fundamental analysts study everything from the overall economy and industry conditions to the financial strength and management of individual companies. Earnings, expenses, assets, and liabilities all come under scrutiny by fundamental analysis. Now, we will define sports card fundamental analysis here shortly. Next up, technical analysis. Differs from fundamental analysis in that traders attempt to identify opportunities by looking at statistical trends such as movements in a stock's price and volume. The core assumption is that all known fundamentals are factored into price, so make sure we remember that. Thus, there is no need to pay close attention to them. Technical analysts do not attempt to measure a security's intrinsic value. Instead, they use stock charts to identify patterns and trends that suggest what a stock will do in the future. So let's go ahead and jump over to the next section here where we will talk about how that actually applies to sports cards. So this is just my definitions. I went ahead and wrote a lot of this stuff out for myself, and I just thought, well, maybe I'll go ahead and make a video about it because hopefully it can help some of you guys with some future purchases. So basically what I'm trying to do here is translate what we just read over to how is that relevant for cards. So let's go ahead and jump into that. Again, this is just my definition. If you guys have other ideas, I would love it if you would comment some of them below and let me know what I maybe missed or what you focus on maybe a little bit more than I do. So here's just my definition. Sports card technical analysis. This is what I factor into it myself. So looking at recent price trends up and down, looking at previous sales, for example, or using graphs and charts to help predict a card's movement in the short term to flip or the long term if you want to buy it and hold it for a while. So also in that same vein, considering a player's career stats, their percentages, the numbers of records they've broken, how many championships they've won, etc., etc. That's all going to be considered in our technical analysis side of things. Now, also you want to probably factor in the population count of specifically graded cards. That will also help you. Technical analysis generally assumes the fundamentals are already priced in, which is what we mentioned from the previous definition. And more or less, you could just think of this as strictly the numbers. So that's what you want to think of for technical. Now, if you think about fundamental, this is the intrinsic value of the card, which we saw in the previous definition. So in other words, the things that aren't tracked as easily by the numbers. So this is more like the hype factor, the buzz around teams, maybe at a certain time of year, maybe it's near the playoffs. What type of fan base or media market do they play in? What does a certain card look like? Does it match the jersey? Does it have some kind of short print or crazy design that looks great with the player's jersey or whatever dunk or baseball swing that they're doing at the time? And then also the eye appeal. So you want to consider maybe you see two cards that are graded as an 8. One is really well centered, one is not so well centered. So that could be considered eye appeal, which again is kind of more subjective, and that is not so much something that you can track by the numbers, which is why we'll consider that in our fundamentals. So moving right into what I think will help myself and you guys the most. And again, I kind of did this originally just to put like a plan in place for myself or to hold myself more accountable to some good practices when buying, selling, trading. And I do think from doing that, it gave me some good ideas, like I said, for this video. And hopefully it will help you guys with figuring out what you want to buy in the future and why you're buying it rather than just jumping in. So I do have a card here that I've shown in a recent video, I think within the past 2 or 3 videos. And we're just going to run through this checklist and see if I actually followed my own rules. However, I would say this card that I picked up, it's a Malik Monk numbered out of 193 disco rated rookie. I think Disco is the right name for the print on that. But yeah, so we're going to go through and just analyze this quickly with the checklist, and we'll see if I actually followed my own rules here. But hopefully this gives you guys some ideas of what to do when you're thinking about buying a card, and maybe it'll steer you clear of a bad buy, or maybe it'll push you into the right buy if you're a little unsure. So technicals wise, recent charts and sales data trends. So when I picked up this Malik Monk, honestly, I was just looking around at similar price items that were currently listed. I really didn't even look at the solds. So I just picked this up, and I was figuring since all of them were pretty low price, you know, under the $10 range, some of them even under the $5 range, I just figured I'm going to just take the risk. So I didn't really do much on the charts and sales data side, to be honest. I probably should have done a little bit more. Are there a ton of graded cards already in the pop count? So I do know that there's definitely not nearly as many graded versions of this card as you would maybe see of like a Luka or a Zion. I mean, they're in the like, what, 20,000 plus range of even like, I think Luka bases or something in the 15 to 20K graded range for PSA. So that I did take into account, and really in general, anything over 5 to 10K is usually like pretty high, which sometimes you'll see with some of the biggest players. But I think this one for sure is gonna meet our criteria on the checklist there. Will this player ever break a match or single season, single game, or career record? So that's another thing you want to maybe ask yourself when you're picking up a card. So with Malik Monk, I've noticed when I started watching him a lot more closely recently, he's definitely pretty deadly from three. So will he break a record? Maybe, maybe not. You would hope maybe in a single game, maybe in the first round of the playoffs, maybe comes close to tying a playoff record for made threes, or maybe sets a Lakers record for made threes or something like that. That would really play into maybe a good time to flip it if he has a huge game. But also keep in mind the modern NBA is definitely driven by three-point shooting. So I do think that plays into our favor in terms of that part of the checklist. Has or will this player win at least one big trophy, individual award, or championship? So will Malik Monk ever win an MVP? That is probably a long shot. However, as far as winning a championship, I mean, right now, given that it's February 7th, the Lakers are not doing great in the Western Conference, but they've recently got Anthony Davis back in the lineup. They got LeBron back in the lineup. Russell Westbrook has his share of games where he goes off. He also has a share of games where he doesn't go off, but the Lakers are such a crazy experienced team, which may go to their detriment given the age of the overall roster, but they're such an experienced team that I think by the time they make the playoffs, if they make the playoffs this year, they could make at least a little bit of a run. So they might not win a title, but I could at least see them being a team that a lot of teams in the West do not want to play in the playoffs. So I would say this year a championship might be kind of a long shot, but we could always be cheering for him a little bit in the side since we're holding some Malik Monk. So now diving into the fundamentals. This is the stuff that's a little harder to track by the numbers, but I think you guys will see what I mean as we go through it, how the fundamentals will work in your favor or against you if you don't make the best buy, which happens to all of us from time to time. So first up, what's the hype factor around this player? So do they have social media buzz? Do they have a ton of followers, which technically you can track that by the numbers, but how's their social media? Do they post a lot? Do they get a lot of engagement? Do they have a lot of press and TV coverage? Are they on Nike, Adidas, shoe commercials, stuff like that? Do they have high-level endorsements or other commercial deals? If you watch any of the NBA, there's tons of just constantly, there's like State Farm commercials, same with the NFL, that have players from the league, the biggest names in them. So even during the games, sometimes you'll see them playing on the court, make a three-pointer, and then it cuts to a commercial, and boom, there they are again. So that definitely keeps players in front of mind for the viewers and the collectors out there. Is this player in a small, medium, or large media market? So Malik Monk does check that one off. He's definitely in a large media market, being that he plays for the LA Lakers. Another thing that works in his favor, he did play his college ball at Kentucky, which is definitely a very large basketball fan base. So I think those factors definitely help cover him on that part of the checklist. And from the previous point, he doesn't have any high-level media or commercial deals that I know of, but just playing on the Lakers, being with LeBron and AD, being in LA certainly helps raise his profile some. Next up, does this team have a large following during the season and in the offseason? I think the Lakers definitely qualify for both of those. Next up, does one specific graded version have better eye appeal than an equal grade of the same card? So that could be centering, the variation, the way the hollow pattern looks, if it's like Pokemon or Metazoo or something. So for this card, again, like I said, for the Disco, I do really like the way this looks. That's also just personal preference, but given that I've been following, people posting a lot of card stuff on social media, it does seem that Disco is a variation that people like. And also it is numbered, so I guess the fact that it's serial numbered is technically probably a little more on the technical side, but you'll see that comes up on our list here in a minute. But yeah, I think the centering on this one is not doing us any favors. It's definitely off center on the front, but I do like the variation and the fact that it's numbered. But yeah, the centering is definitely not perfect. So just keep that in mind if you're looking at a graded example of two of the same card. Does this card have a jersey or team color match? Not so much with this one. You could maybe argue the Hornets have some blue and this card has some blue. I mean, I do still think it looks nice colors-wise. Sorry I don't have the big card screen up for this video, but you guys have seen this one before if you've watched the recent videos. So not so much of a color match in this one, but think about like people love the LeBron Prism Gold because it matches the Lakers, and also just Prism Gold is rare, but that's another example. Next up, does the serial numbered card match the jersey number of the player? So that could kind of be fundamental or technical. I think this one does not. This one would have to be number 1, which is the jersey he's wearing here, and I believe for the Lakers now he's actually switched to number 11. So our card is not numbered 1 or 11 out of 193, which is a bummer, but that's okay. I didn't buy it for that reason. If you happen to be looking on eBay, ComC, or any websites like that though, and the seller doesn't have it noted as being jersey numbered, and you happen to notice that it's jersey numbered, that can be absolutely a steal in your favor. So take advantage if you see a jersey number matchup. Next up would be, does this team usually make the playoffs? And is it in a big league in terms of coverage, both stateside and internationally? So does the team usually make the playoffs? Yeah, the Lakers in general have a long history of being in the playoffs and winning tons of championships. So that definitely helps. Again, not the best start to the season this year, but around the halfway or a little further point, they could definitely make a run and easily be back in the playoff picture. And internationally speaking, the NBA, I know at least has a huge following in the Asian markets. I know it's huge in the United States, and I'm sure many other countries around the world. I don't know every single country where the biggest followings are, but I do know that there are quite a few big countries that are very interested in the NBA. So as we get down here to our final thoughts, we want to think about what matters more. So I would say, just to define it quickly, both matter very much so. So when investing in a new card or player, this checklist I hope will steer you guys in the right direction. You don't have to necessarily have someone check off everything on this list, and like I said, as you can see with this Malik Monk card, I absolutely did not hit every single checklist point, but I think I hit enough checklist points that I feel pretty confident I can either flip it in the next month or two or hold on to it for a while and see if his career develops, because he's only a 4th-year player. So another thing, just going back to the technicals that I did look at, one more thing I remembered here towards the end, I did actually go back and look through Malik Monk's stats, and if you look back season to season to season, this is his 4th season, his minutes per game are generally on the rise, his points per game are generally on the rise, and that certainly helps. And just given how he's playing right now, he is definitely on a hot streak. So if you look at his recent games, there'll be a 10-point game, maybe a 15, then a 30, then a 29, then a little less, maybe a 15, a 10, then go off for 30. So he's definitely finding his own and almost becoming an undroppable shooting guard in that Lakers lineup, which is actually kind of a nice combo given that LeBron is kind of running point guard. It's nice to have a shooting guard that can just knock down threes as deadly as him. So if I forgot anything, or if you guys think we should add to the checklist or maybe take some away that you didn't think were super helpful, be sure you drop a comment. And as always, please subscribe if you're new. Thanks again for checking out this video, and looking forward to seeing you next time.